When most people think of pilgrimage, there are a couple examples that usually come to mind. The Hajj, the Camino de Santiago, Jerusalem, Vatican City. These places are enshrined in the public consciousness as places of self-transformation and revelation. However, transformation comes in many forms, and with a variety of catalysts. Truly, the idea of secular pilgrimage at all has caused some skepticism. The idea of conventions being a form of pilgrimage, in a way, seems blasphemous. But video game players can attest to the reality of the emotions and bonds games create through their worlds, stories, and characters. But what about the bonds between players? And the bond between player and developer? For members of the video game community, with their culture crossing nations and transcending languages, there are few opportunities to realize the virtual in the physical, except, that is, for video game conventions, expos, and competitions. These events provide the nexus for video game society, but can they be equated to pilgrimages? Well, similar to religious pilgrimages, these events provide a structure for people with different backgrounds, but the same mutual understanding, to come together for a common goal. In this case, to find and play the best games, and in the process strengthen their bonds with the community that brought them there. Before I start, first I need to lay down some groundwork, namely what is a pilgrimage and what events are we talking about. Firstly, while there is a public idea of what a pilgrimage is, giving specific characteristics is difficult, as pilgrimage is more of a social construct than an actual practice. But there are some characteristics that can generally be agreed upon and that I will be using as benchmarks. The most obvious one is some form of travel, although even this isn't strictly necessary. However, even when lacking in a physical journey, there should be some emotional or spiritual change, whether making the pilgrim wiser, gaining the favor of a deity, or gaining respect from others in society. Another characteristic of pilgrimage, according to Coleman and Elsner's Pilgrimage, Past and Present in the World of Religions, are the physical and metaphysical symbols. Is there a rallying point for the journey? Is it centered around a particular deity or figure? Are there symbols that all people are capable of recognizing? There should also be souvenirs, like charms and pictures, to share with others back home. Specific to pop culture pilgrimage, Lamrex discusses the influence of transnationality, and Srinivas also talks about the complex construction of meeting with pop culture figures. With regard to the events, I will be referencing large video game conferences such as E3, Paris Games Week, Tokyo Game Show, and similar events. These are all industry-run, but fan-organized events such as Awesome Games Done Quick and esports tournaments can also apply. These events are typically held annually, and when open to the public do require a ticket. For E3 2018, a 3-day pass cost $250 US. However, people fly in from all over the world for these events, making the cost differ. Attendance for these events can also differ, but for reference, E3, widely thought of as the most important event of the year, had 69,800 attendees in 2018, and the largest stream of the event had 1.6 million simultaneous views. There have been many secular events that have been regarded by lay people, attendees, and scholars as potential sites of pilgrimage. However, the idea of a convention likely causes more skepticism than, say, Burning Man. Why? Well, much of the initial reluctance to thinking of game conventions as pilgrimage sites likely comes from the outsider's vision of what they are. While press conferences are watched, they are not shows in the same way that movies are. They're events, which require active participation. You can't just watch or go to the convention on your day off like you would a movie. Watching live is an integral part of the experience. People take days off of work. For some people, watching the conference is their work, and gather online to experience it in the way that they see fit. There are also things to do beyond simply watching press conferences. For those able to travel to the show floor, there are countless numbers of games to play, often with the developers on hand to talk to players and receive feedback. While there is certainly more to do at the event than at home, an effort has been made to include those who cannot physically attend, which differentiates this from other virtual pilgrimages. People at home can watch all-day coverage, trailer analyses, and even play games and demos released the same day they are announced in an increasingly popular practice sometimes called shadow dropping. Another difference between these conventions and other kinds of shows is that their structure allows for the formation of rituals and katas of a sort for regular attendees. The annual structure allows people to plan around them and grow familiar with their layouts. Just from habit, it is expected that PlayStation will present Monday night, and that Nintendo will present Tuesday morning, and so on, in the same way that pilgrimages like the Hajj have a rigid schedule. Even spontaneous events like Nintendo Directs have a structure. It's expected for them to be announced a day or two before, to warn how long they are, and perhaps to give some idea of a particular topic. Similarly, within these events, there is plenty of room for structured practices to take place, ones that can be customized according to the person. Someone may choose to always visit Sony day one, then Nintendo, then Capcom, etc. Some may have predefined places to eat, people they have to see, and so on. This is an example of the complex creation of meaning Srinivas mentioned in their work, and is similar to pilgrimages like Fushimi Inari. So then there is a physical element to these conventions, and even a proper structure of engagement, but does it create an emotional response? Well, yes, that's proven pretty easily by all of the reaction clips online. However, the more interesting point to talk about is why and how it does this. Well, the most obvious and important answer to the why, which separates games from other subcultures, is the sheer dedication it takes to participate. There is a literal investment in video games in the form of time and money. Game consoles can cost upwards of $200 used, and games currently trend between $25 and $60. But a lot of things cost money, so it isn't nearly as important as the time cost, which for some games is intended to be 60 to 100 hours minimum. And people start participating in these activities as young as 5 years old. It's natural then that when people have invested so much of their lives to video games that they would want to share that experience. As a result, a gaming community has developed with its own culture and symbols. This then gets into the how. There may not be a holy book to define the doctrine, but there is a canon spanning all of video game history, and its deities are the people and things that stood out. One characteristic of a pilgrimage is the use of recognizable symbols. Well, for the gaming community, those symbols are both characters in games themselves and the people that are widely known to the community. Companies use and exploit these symbols in an attempt to generate goodwill and positive reactions. Of course, for those seeking to break into the industry, or even industry veterans, this can backfire horribly. Just see the response to the couch panel at PSX 2017, or the even more cringeworthy butchering of gamer language at GDC 2018. But when it works really well. Take, for example, the iconic trailer for Final Fantasy VII Remake. The entire trailer calls to the fans. The word South Edge on the map, the playground in the slums, the slow crawl of devs, all leading up to the reveal of Cloud Strife's back. He's such an icon that just his sword, shoulder pauldron, and that haircut is enough to recognize him. They don't even show the game's title, they just show the logo and expect the viewer to know what game it is, because the audience it's meant for does know. Many devs have used similar ideas in their E3 booths in recent years, replicating familiar environments to transport attendees. These memories then, the reaction clips, photos, and physical merch, all serve as souvenirs to remind people of the journey they made and serve as a focal point of what that journey represents. But just because it has hit some of the checklists determined by scholars isn't necessarily enough. Does this sensation of change last? This is where my experience becomes less objective. There is, of course, a high around conventions, a feeling which is replicated not only every year, but every time I think about them. That's present in many pilgrimages, however. I think the standout factor with these events is the communitas, and how they converge. As described by Coleman and Elsner, communitas is a concept developed by anthropologists Victor and Edith Turner, which describes how pilgrims leave conventional social structures and enter a world of anti-structure. This absence of regular norms and hierarchies results in the construction of what they call spontaneous social bonds through shared experience, the loss of what traditionally defines the self into the collective. This is an ideal. Not every religious pilgrimage produces this sensation, but in my experience not only is it present here, it sets them apart. But you don't need to just take my word for it. There are plenty of clips that prove my point.
Funded tomorrow. It's already funded. This guy's crying too. He's there with you. Today.
Did you catch that? He said he's there with you. At the moment of this clip, the two people being talked about are physically separated, but emotionally they're in the same place. It doesn't matter what they do or who they are, that one is a fan and one works in the industry, that one is at the conference and one is watching from their office. At that moment, their status doesn't matter because mentally they're in the same place. For an instant, they leave conventional society behind and form bonds not based on any pre-existing structure, but on emotions caused by their shared experience. Their background in the community has allowed them to feel communitas. And because community is what creates communitas, communitas too shapes one's relationship with the community. This is how that sensation of change becomes lasting. Just like how going on pilgrimage can make someone questioning their faith feel more religious, going to these events creates a stronger bond between the individual and the community. It's almost a status symbol, allowing the person to have exclusive experiences, interact with their idols, meet their friends maybe for the first time in person, and perhaps learn more about themselves along the way. Are conventions a form of pilgrimage? Just like it's impossible to concretely describe pilgrimage, there's no concrete answer to that. But for the many attendees across the globe who have been permanently impacted by these journeys, the answer to that question may be yes.